People don't always respond logically to getting hurt. Sometimes when we're in a situation that is clearly not working out for us, whether it's a relationship, a job, a living situation, something that is very obviously going downhill, we often find it very, very difficult to just give up on that thing and walk away from it. When we see someone else in a similar situation, we tend to have a very different reaction. We say, why is that person still there? Why are they still putting up with that? Why don't they just leave? But when it is us, suddenly it becomes a million times harder and we really struggle to take our own advice. There can be many, many reasons why people behave in this way, but one of the most common is something called sunk cost fallacy. A fallacy is a logical error. In other words, it's a way that many or even most people think or behave that doesn't really make a lot of sense and often gets us into trouble. I think of fallacies as being a lot like glitches in the coding of our minds. Human beings can be so smart and yet so stupid, frankly, at the same time. And I am no exception to this. I have fallen victim to sunk cost fallacy in my own life more times than I can count. What happens when we're experiencing sunk cost fallacy is that the more we have invested in something, the harder it is to walk away from that thing, because the more we feel like we will have lost when we walk away. That investment can be money, it can be time, it can be energy, it can be love, it can be anything that is important to you. If we were completely logical beings, we would behave in the complete opposite way of what I just described. If we've invested heavily in something and it's clearly not working out and it's clearly going downhill and it's painfully obvious that it's not going to get any better, we would have just this clear-headed moment where we say, enough is enough, this is not worth it anymore, and we would just leave. We would just walk away. The reason it is so hard for us to do this is because when we're heavily invested in something, in some form or another, the loss of your investment, the loss of that time, the loss of that energy, doesn't actually become real. And we don't actually feel the pain of it until we decide that we are done. And until we make that decision, we can hold on to hope and we can defer the pain that maybe everything we put into this thing won't actually be lost. Just to give an example, you see this all the time in the stock market. So if you're not into the stock market at all, when you buy shares of a company and those shares increase or decrease in value, you don't actually gain or lose any money right away. It's all just theoretical. It all just exists on paper. You don't experience a financial gain or loss from the shares until you sell those shares. Whether they've gone up 10 times what you paid for them, or they're now worth a fraction of what you paid, that loss or gain isn't real until you sell. And that's literally the term for that. If you buy shares, it goes up and you sell, that's called a realized gain. If it goes down and you sell, it's called a realized loss. And until you sell, if it's gone down, until you sell, there's always the chance, there's always the hope that it could go back up and all the money you put into this company is not lost. So let me give you an example of how this actually plays out just practically in real life. Let's say that you and I both invest in Apple. This is not investment advice, I just made up a popular company. You invest $10 in Apple stock and I invest $1,000 in Apple stock on the same day. And let's just say that literally that day, like 5 minutes after we invest, Apple tanks and it goes down by 10%. You've lost $1 and I've lost $100. Logically, you would think I'm more likely to get out of there because I've already lost $100. I'm like, wow, this is terrible. I don't want any part of this. Let me go put the rest of my money somewhere else. Whereas you might stay in because you've only lost $1. It's like, who cares, right? I may as well just stay in and see. Maybe it'll go up. But in fact, it works out the opposite. Because you've only lost $1, you have virtually no problem cutting your losses, moving on, and trying an investment somewhere else. I've lost $100, theoretically. And that hurts me quite a bit. I don't want to have lost that $100. So I am actually much more likely to stay invested in Apple than you are because I am hoping it goes back up so I won't have to feel that pain of losing $100. And everything in life works like this. When you are desperately holding on to that last shred of hope that this relationship you're in that just keeps getting less and less pleasant to be a part of, the more time goes on, You are praying that those months or years, maybe even decades that you spent with this person or this organization, if it's a job, whatever it is, won't have been for nothing. Because the second you make that decision to be done, that's the moment where you realize that loss and the pain hits you full force. And we can live in such fear of that pain and of that realization that we just defer and avoid, and we don't leave, and we don't cut our losses and move on. It is perfectly understandable not to want to face that pain. I get it. I've done it. But it almost never works. And the reason it almost never works is because, bear with me on this one, you are not an idiot. You're not. You have insight. You have pattern recognition. You have critical thinking. If you're like 80% sure or 90% sure or maybe even higher than that this thing, whatever it is not going to turn around, that's probably the time to stop investing in it. Because the longer you hold out, the longer you defer making that decision, the more invested you become. You're continuing to invest in this thing every day. And the more invested you become, the harder it is to walk away. And so every day you stay in this situation that hurts you, you are devoting more and more resources to it, which is gradually but steadily increasing the pain of the realized losses that you are eventually going to incur when you exit. I know, I get it. I know you think you're avoiding or deferring pain by waiting to see if it turns around. But the truth is, in most cases, you're doing the opposite. Because every day that goes by without making a change is a day that you stack that deck against yourself and increase the cost of exit. I know this is kind of somber and kind of intense, so let me give you a little bit of good news here. Something that can help soften the pain of walking away from something that you once had very high hopes for and that you've poured a lot into is the knowledge that you may not have lost as much as it feels like initially. In fact, I can almost guarantee you haven't lost as much as it feels like initially. I am generally of the opinion that while pain is an indicator of loss, it is not an indicator of waste. And that's what often hurts even more, is not just, I lost this time that I invested in this person or this whatever. I wasted this time because this relationship isn't going to be a part of my future. I don't view it that way, because every experience that you have and every relationship that you're in that doesn't end up the way you wanted it to is still a valuable source of information. We are born with no experiences. I don't believe in like past lives or collective memories or anything like that. That's just my perspective. I don't believe in it. I believe we are born with nothing. And so we enter this world with nearly limitless possibilities, and we don't know who we are, and we don't know what we like or want or don't want. And the only way to ever figure any of that out is to have experiences. And a lot of those experiences are going to hurt. But every time you have an experience in a certain domain of life that does not end the way you wanted it to end, you have gathered data about yourself in that area. And what that data does is it shrinks the gates through which every experience in that domain must pass. So I'll stick with the dating example. When I first started dating, I had two criteria for potential partners. Number one, they had to be female, because I am a heterosexual straight male. Number two, they had to at least seem to like me. That was it. Those were my criteria. So if you were a female and you seemed to have some interest in me, yeah, let's give it a try. Let's see what happens. And shockingly, those weren't enough standards to create a successful relationship. And I had a lot of unsuccessful dating experiences. And every time I did, I added a standard. I learned something about a person. Like, for example, no offense to any of you who I'm describing, this is just my romantic preference. I learned I don't like Disney adults. It's just not my thing, you know? It just didn't work. And every time, every relationship that didn't work out, these gates got a little bit narrower because more and more criteria were being added for me. And eventually, the romantic interest criteria gate got so narrow for me that only a compatible partner could pass through them. And that is, in fact, what happened. And that's why I've been happily married for 17 years. And everything in life works that way. There's some people just luck into stuff really early on, but there's almost no way to get to that point without pain. So whatever you've invested into this thing, it's not it's a loss in a sense, but it's not a waste. You aren't getting nothing from it, even if you don't get the long-term thing that you were hoping for. Now, really quick, one thing that you definitely should hold on to and should invest in is the health of your pet. I think that is something that you will very rarely, if ever, regret, because our animals provide us with so much love and support. I think the least we can do in return is provide them with healthy, high-quality food. I want to let you guys know that today's video is sponsored by GetJoy. GetJoy offers freeze-dried raw dog food made only from natural ingredients that you can recognize and pronounce. Freeze-dried raw dog food gives your dog all the benefits of a raw food diet without the hassle and the mess. All of the meat is USDA sourced, and the food also contains probiotics and natural supplements like pumpkin to support digestive health and salmon oil to support skin, coat, and joint health. If you order with the link in the description or the QR code on the screen, you'll get 50% off your first order, a free scoop, and a bag of freeze-dried raw treats. Now, before we go, there's one last thing I want to put out there to you. There's also something called inverse sunk cost fallacy, which is basically if I haven't started yet, I have missed my window and it is too late to invest in this thing. So because I haven't started investing, I shouldn't do it now. So a really common example of this is, frankly, social media. And I fell victim to this so hard. I started this channel in January of 2023. There are a lot of therapists on YouTube, and YouTube has been around for quite a while. And I frankly spent years thinking like, I missed my window. I should have made a YouTube account 10 years ago and been like one of the first therapists on YouTube. And then I'd have, millions of followers because I'd be like the only guy. And I'm like, well, it's too late. That people are already saying what I would say. That market is now covered and saturated. And eventually, for some reason, I just decided, screw it, I'm going to do it anyway. And it's worked out pretty well. You don't ever really know when it is too late. You can look back in your life and say, maybe I did miss this clearly optimal window of time when this thing would have been easier to invest in or would have been more likely to produce the desired results. But that doesn't mean that if your timing is not literally perfect for this thing, whatever it is, that it does not have a chance of working out. And we end up having the opposite problem because every day that goes by without you investing in this thing that you want or you value is a day that the wall between you and that thing gets bigger and bigger and harder to break through. So the longer you procrastinate it, the harder it's going to be to even get started on this thing. And we often need some kind of like external jolt, if you will, to get us to break through inverse sunk cost fallacy. An example of this that I think about a lot, and it's fictional, is from the movie Fight Club. And I guess a slight trigger warning on this. It does have a relatively mild graphic depiction of violence. But if you haven't seen Fight Club, there's a scene in the movie where Tyler, I guess it's the same guy, they don't rob a guy, but they take a guy at gunpoint. But what they tell him, they ask him basically like what his dreams for his life were. I think he's working at a gas station or something. And they ask him like what he wanted to be. And he said he wanted to be a veterinarian. And they tell him that they're going to kill him unless he signs up for vet school. And he does. That scene always stuck with me because it always made me think like, what would we do if we were actually under duress? Would we actually follow our dreams and chase our passions and do the things we really know that we should have been doing all along? If there were just some reason, if something broke us out of our like anti-momentum state and gave us a reason to start. Thankfully, I don't think anyone is going to force you to pursue your dreams at gunpoint. So you have to be the catalyst for that. You have to be the reason. And I know it's a very old cliche saying. I don't remember what the source of this saying is, but like the best time to start would have been sometime in the past, but the second best time to start is today. So whether you're like wanting to be in a romantic relationship and you just aren't putting yourself out there on the dating scene, or aren't in situations where you could be meeting people, or if you have a career, a passion, a creative outlet, and you think, I missed my window, I waited too long. Well, based on what? Can you find this? This is what I always go for. Because you can always find somebody younger. Like you can always find someone who beat you to the punch, et cetera, et cetera. Like always, you can always find that. That's not helpful, because that's just demotivating. The question should be, can you find somebody older? Can you find somebody who started later than where you would be starting if you started today and still made it? If you can find that person, then with all due respect, you have no excuse. And I think that's a good thing, because I think we probably make far too many excuses for ourselves in life. And that's what enables us to live under the oppressive something. The word didn't come to me there. Whatever fallacies do to us that are oppressive. Blanket, curtain, the iron curtain of fallacies. I'm losing my way right now. I think this is a sign that I need to be done, because I am now rambling and you guys aren't here to see me ramble. So I'm going to cut it off here. Hopefully you got some good value out of today's content. I certainly hope so. And I will see you next time. Take care.